There's always been a certain stigma that most scout primaries are garbage. Well, not garbage, but they are definitely inferior to the stock scattergun. Like, why bother changing to something else when you already have an obviously reliable source of damage that works for any situation and gets the job done at the end of the day? And yet, does that really mean that other guns are just not worth your attention? Well, it depends on what your end goal is. If you just want to kill reliably, then sure, go for stock. Though you might eventually get tired of the same playstyle that just a single primary can lock you in. But if you want to experiment with how much you can do as a class or just have more fun and variety in your playstyle, then you can't possibly ignore the options that the game offers you, even if the alternatives truly are questionable at first glance. I know I didn't, and thankfully I feel confident enough to say that I've spent a good amount of time playing around with different weapons to know what works best for me in different situations. I was in fact quite pleasantly surprised to see how fun and even useful certain weapons are. It just took a bit of time to get used to them and figure out what works best with what. Sup people of all kinds, I'm RT the Runner, and in this video I would like to share my opinion on every single scout primary in the game, starting from my most favorite that I use the most and ending with the worst that I use the least. I'll briefly go over their stats and talk about the ways you can get the most out of them. If you agree or disagree on some things I say or have something to add, please feel free to comment. I'd love to hear your opinion as well. That being said, let's have a look at our first contender. You obviously know what's gonna be my best pick. Everyone can agree that the stock scattergun is the absolute best primary in Scout's arsenal. And can you blame them? Reliable and consistent source of damage in terms of strength and versatility, along with complete lack of hindering downsides, makes this gun a definitive go-to for all Scout players of any skill level. But honestly, that's the only reason it's at the top of everyone's list, including mine. Stock is pretty universal, but that's about it. There's not really much to talk about here, so we'll just move on to more interesting and somewhat controversial alternatives. Guns that add some spice into your life of killing a scout, and yet can make it harder in certain situations. Now this is my personal favorite scatter gun that is not stock. I absolutely adore this gun. Let's go over its stats real quick to know exactly why. You start off with 10% less speed than normal and smaller clip size by 2 shots. You gain boost by dealing damage that makes you run faster, up to 30% faster than a normal scout on max boost. In order to max out your boost, you need to do 100 points of damage to any enemy with any weapon at your disposal. But you lose that boost upon getting hit or double jumping. More precisely, you lose 75% of your boost on double jumping and 4% on each point of damage. Regarding that last bit, in order to completely lose your boost, you have to get hit by 25 points of damage. This is the most significant downside to this gun. 25 points of damage need to be taken for you to lose all of your boost, while 100 is required to fill it up. Feels a little unfair, doesn't it? But in my opinion, that's the point. You are encouraged, some would even say forced, to actively do damage while avoiding it for yourself at all costs. Much like Force of Nature, which I'll talk about in a bit, BFB is a hit and run type of weapon with a very high risk, high reward approach. It grants you a speed boost that helps you outrun incoming damage in a lot of cases, while also limiting your damage output, vertical mobility, and the amount of damage you're allowed to take before you lose your boost. It's very hard to get a grasp on when you first start out. It does require a bit of experience to fully realize its potential. But as you get used to it and get in rhythm that this gun runs on, it's actually so much fun to use. I mean, of course, it's still pretty situational. It's really good on some maps, sections of maps, while kinda bad on others. Sometimes you need to be a bit more committed to certain encounters instead of running around and doing damage here and there. Sometimes you absolutely need your speed as a scout and can't afford to get slowed down. And sometimes that extra jump is just necessary for your survival. Granted, you can still double jump should the situation call for it, but that's something you should do as a last resort in an encounter. In any case, if the time is right, BFB is absolutely worth getting into. The best weapons to combo it with, in my opinion, are Flying Guillotine for damage over time that can fill up 40% of your boost in ideal conditions, and a Fan of War. The last one is a much safer way of giving yourself a damage boost over your opponent, and potentially making them more vulnerable to whoever decides to finish them off. So basically, this is a loadout that I like to call Ninja Scout, or Weep Scout if you will. You can also use weapons like Criticola and Boston Basher, but they are pretty risky considering your already potentially fragile state with BFB. Rap Assassin also works, but Flying Guillotine has higher base damage and lower cooldown unlike Rap Assassin's Ball. Candy Cane is fine, but it's up to your
personal preference,
so use it with discretion. Overall, Babyface's Blaster is a lot of fun to use, and I love it a lot. But it takes a bit of getting used to if you really want to get the most out of it. Soda Popper is my second favorite scout primary. I was gonna put the Backscatter on here, but I picked Soda Popper instead due to reasons I'll talk about later. For now, stats. It fires 50% faster than stock, reloads 25% faster, but you have 4 less shots in the clip. Just like BFB, it has a boost, or in this case hype mechanic, which when filled up grants you 5 mid-air jumps for 10 seconds. And that's it. What makes this weapon so different from the rest is that it's a gun that grants you the most vertical mobility. Sure, you need to do 350 points of damage to fill up your hype meter, which is quite a lot, but if you manage to do so, you'll get a little trump card you will be able to use to your advantage at any time, granted you don't die beforehand. 5 extra mid-air jumps can either get you out of a tight spot, or throw off your enemy's aim for just long enough to kill them or escape. It's basically a pocket set of Flappy Bird wings, which can be insanely useful. Pair it up with the Winger, and you can get a taste of the skies that ancient majestic scout birds thrived on a long time ago. I miss that glitch. It was so much fun. Anyway, other than that, it's a pretty solid gun by itself. Use it with the Flying Guillotine or Rap Assassin because extra bleed damage will be pretty useful to build up hype. Take aforementioned Winger to get more height with your jumps, but any pistol of your choice is fine. You can try to use Fanowar or Criticola for extra damage. Atomizer is also okay, but only if you're memeing or going for the item set. But don't think it'll give you 1 extra jump. Trust me, it doesn't work, I double checked. Now we're gonna talk about a similar gun that is more about strength than mobility. Unlike the Popper, Force of Nature has a 10% damage penalty, which almost means nothing really, and reloads at normal speed. But it also has more bullets per shot, meaning that it has a higher chance of grazing the target with its spread, and it gives knockback on every shot. Knockback is the selling point of this gun. On the plus side, with the right timing, you can send the opponent flying. The knockback is that incredibly strong. You can even perform a triple jump with it that allows for greater heights, though that's still not what this gun is about. On the downside, however, you are just as susceptible to your knockback as your enemies are. Personally, I do not recommend jumping around while fighting with this thing, or at least advise extreme caution. One wrongly aimed shot from this thing, and you will be stopped dead in your tracks. And as I like to say, stock scout is a dead scout. And that's the reason why I prefer Soda Popper over this gun. I much prefer the mobility that Popper provides without having to worry about which direction I'm pointing my shots at. Still, I recognize how fun and yet annoying this gun can get, with latter being towards both the user and the target. Realistically, you can use pretty much any weapon with this gun. It just depends on your playstyle and even on how much of an asshole you want to be by using this thing. Originally, this was supposed to be my second favorite primary after Babyface's Blaster, but the more I used it, the more it became kind of like an occasional fun thing to pick. Compared to stock, it has 2 less shots in the clip and is 20% less accurate. It also doesn't deal random crits, but frankly the less guns do the better. I have kind of a beef with random crits, but that's for another time. The only upside that the Backscatter has is that it mini crits when you shoot someone in the back. A potentially fun and interesting weapon to use, sure, I do pick it every now and then because the moments when you shoot someone unsuspecting or fleeing, especially spies and medics in the back, deal extra damage and finish them off sooner than they anticipated, are frankly priceless. But we can all agree that its upside is not that worth it most of the time. Sure, you might get some extra damage on your first shot, but what about when you're already engaged in combat with someone? Now you have less shots to counter enemies with, and those shots are less accurate on top of that. I guess it promotes you to be more like Spy, to get in, get as much damage off as possible, and maybe finish someone off, and get out. Unfortunately, opportunities to be sneaky as a scout aren't exactly common, and those that happen work out in your favor even less than if you were a spy. Your best bet is to secure an area of the map and just stay out of sight until it is time to attack, or to find a way around your enemies that isn't gonna attract attention. Overall, I think it can be a fun weapon, but I personally would much rather get a hit with a Fan of War first and take it from there. And finally, the worst primary that Scout currently has in my opinion. Not to say that it's awful or anything, it's just really meh, at least in a normal game mode. So it has 4 shots in its clip, it's 40% more accurate, it shoots 40% faster, but it also has 40% less bullets in each shot, and even if they do twice the normal damage, it results in 20% less damage than stock on point blank. All in all, this means that Shortstop is faster and more accurate, but deals less damage than stock. In theory, the fact that it's more accurate can make it a more or less decent mid-range primary, but since it does less damage, finishing someone off in that case is not that easy. Not to mention the pitiful shove mechanic that just can't compete with a Force of Nature's knockback. I don't use it very often, but if I do, it's when I don't feel like fighting anyone in close encounters, and prefer to help out others with a bit of damage. Which is why I feel like the Shortstop could very well be a more supportive Scout primary. It just needs a bit of tweaking to be truly more viable. Maybe make the shove a bit stronger and with less cooldown, maybe add just a tiny bit more damage to it or something. Oh, it also has 20% more push force taken from damage and air blast, which makes damage surfing as Scout pretty interesting. So yeah, I think Shortstop deserves more thought put into it, at least in its current state. It sucks that it's so underused, but as of right now, it can't be helped. And that should be it for all of Scout primaries. Hopefully I didn't bore you too much with explanations, but I just really wanted to go into detail on what makes each gun special and encourage you to at least give each of them a try. Don't be afraid to take what each primary has to offer for a spin, even if it means having to bear with its flaws sometimes. Take your time to learn how to make the most out of your favorite gun, and have fun while doing it. If there is a demand, I would like to make a couple more videos like this regarding Scout secondaries and melees, which I think provide even more variety to your playstyle, and can even help you be a more valuable player to your team. So if you wouldn't mind me talking more about that, please let me know. I'd be happy to receive more feedback. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.